Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my first impressions of the Hifiman EF600. And I've actually had this for a little while, but I had so many pieces of equipment in at one time, I kind of set this aside a little bit. So finally got some time in on this, and I'm gonna give you my first impressions video. And first of all, just wanted to start out by saying this is on loan from Hifiman. It has a retail price of $799, but is currently on sale at Hifiman for $649 US. This is a combination headphone amp and DAC, and it also can be used as a headphone stand. This uses two DAC chips that are both Hifiman's own Himalaya Pro, compared to the EF400, which used the original Himalaya DAC chips. This is the Pro version, the same that's used in the Serenade, I believe. This unit has three digital inputs. It has coax, Bluetooth, and USB, and there's actually two USB ports on this. One is a Type B and the other is a Type C, but they're not separate inputs. You can use one or the other. There's no way to switch from, if you hook up both of them, there's no way to switch back and forth. There's only one USB input on the input selection. So there are two analog inputs. Those are RCA and XLR on the rear, and there are four analog outputs, which also would be RCA and XLR on the rear. And I did want to mention those are fixed volume. This cannot be used as a preamp. It does not have a preamp function. Those are fixed, so you can use this as a standalone DAC, running it into another amp. It also has two headphone outputs on the front, and that would be your 6.3 millimeter and 4-pin XLR. This unit has two gain settings, and it also has a switch to, well, it's actually, you toggle through, but you can choose either oversampling or non-oversampling, and you can do that at either gain setting. This is rated by Hifiman to put out 5.12 watts per channel into 32 ohms, so this thing has a ton of power. According to Hifiman, it has a signal to noise ratio of 118 decibels, a total harmonic distortion of 0.0014%, and a channel separation of 131 decibels. This unit is 4.1 inches wide at the bottom, or, well, actually it's not tapered sideways, so it's 4.1 inches wide. It's 6.5 inches deep front to back. That's not including the volume knob. And it's 11.1 inches tall, and it weighs in at about 6¼ pounds. I'll try to roll in just a little bit here and show you the unit a little better. On the front here, you have two switches here. This one toggles between your low gain and high gain, and your oversampling and non-oversampling. And that is one of the issues I do have with this, because the EF400, you had a knob and you could turn it either way. You had the four choices: non-oversampling, high gain, oversampling, high gain, and then the same with low gain, but you could switch back and forth. This has one button and you have to toggle through. So the problem I have with that is if you're on high gain, if you go to oversampling, then you have to go through the low gain settings to get back to the non-oversampling. Or if you're in low gain, you have to toggle through the high gain settings to get to switch the oversampling or non-oversampling. And if you are listening and you're on low gain, you're probably going to have to turn the volume down before you can do that, because it's going to kick into high gain, and high gain is too much for most headphones with this amp. There's only a few headphones that are going to require high gain on this. That would be the Hifiman Sesfara and the Hifiman HE6 and maybe a few others that I'm not aware of. But most headphones, you're going to be on low gain on this. Then your other switch here is to toggle through your inputs, and I'm fine with the way that works. Your first up at the top, each one lights up, and the USB coaxial are actually the same, and it will change color when you go from USB to coaxial on the input. I was a little confused with that at first. I couldn't get coaxial to work, and I didn't realize I had to push it again. The light was on, but I had to push it a second time to go over from USB to coaxial. And I did want to mention that when I first got this, I did have a small problem with it that actually turned out to be a pretty easy fix. And I don't know if this was a shipping issue. Hifiman ships UPS, and a lot of the times the boxes show up pretty banged up, and I think they handle these pretty rough. But anyway, the first time I hooked this up to the coax hookup, it worked fine. And then the next time I went to turn it on, coax wasn't working for some reason. And I reached back and jiggled the cable a little bit, and it started working. So I switched to another cable, and I was having the same problem. If I touched it at all, it would cut in and out, my coax input. And I tried 4 different cables, had the same problem. So what I ended up doing, I was going to contact Hifiman about it, but I figured I'd mess with it a little bit. And as you can see, this has a high quality coax connector here, and it has a nut on the back. And all I did was loosen that nut a little bit and retightened it, and now it's fine, and it works with whatever USB cable, or I mean not USB, coax cable I put on. So I'm thinking it was just a ground issue or something, you know, maybe that nut grounds it to the chassis or whatever. And so I haven't had any problems since, and I've had this a few months now. So anyway, I kind of lost where I was at. Oh, I was talking about the inputs. Then you've got your volume knob here, which is kind of strange. Every other amp I've ever reviewed had a round volume knob, and this one has this kind of rectangle shaped, and it's just hard to get used to. I would prefer round, but I guess there really isn't an issue with this. It does have a slight amount of play, but not enough to really be a big deal. But it's just a little bit, I guess it gives it a unique look, is the reason Hifiman went with that instead of a round knob. But I did mention that most headphones you're going to be in low gain on this, and because this does have so much power, you're probably going to be around 3 o'clock with most headphones on your volume. And if a headphone's real sensitive, you're going to be even lower than that. You're going to, I'm sorry, not 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I'm looking at it backwards, but if you real sensitive headphone, you might even be down around 8 o'clock, and it's a little bit touchy. I tried the Grotto SR80E with this, which is very sensitive, and I was probably down around the 8:30 position on the volume knob with that. But it worked out fine. It did actually sound really good with this amp. Then also on the front, you've got your headphone input or headphone outputs, and that's a 6.3 millimeter single-ended and a 4-pin XLR balanced output. And as you'll notice, this does not have the other 2 headphone outputs that the EF400 had, and that was a 4.4 millimeter balanced and a 3.5 millimeter single-ended. But you can get adapters to go from 6.3 to 3.5. Everyone has those, and then you can get an adapter pretty cheap to go from 4-pin XLR to 4.4 millimeter balance, so not really a big issue. Turning around, taking a look at the back here, up at the top you have your digital inputs, which would be your Bluetooth, your coax, and your 2 different types of USB input. You have a type B and a type A. Then you drop down, and these are, the light's weird in here. These are your inputs at the top. You've got your RCA single-ended inputs, your XLR balanced inputs, and then you have your outputs here, which once again are fixed. You can use this unit as a standalone DAC, but not as a preamp. Anyway, you've got your XLR balanced and your RCA single-ended. Then you've got your power switch down here at the bottom and your AC input for your power cable. And I did want to mention this is the only switch on this to turn it on and off. So you do have to reach around back. But because it is narrow, it's easy to reach around there and turn this on and off. So anyway, before I get into the sound of this, I wanted to mention what equipment I used in reviewing this so far. And once again, this is just my first impressions. I will do a full review of this at a later point where I will do more in-depth comparisons to other amps and other DACs, and I'm still getting situated here. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know I just switched cameras. I'm now doing my videos in 4K, and I'm still trying to figure out my setup and all that. I just got this little table here to set things on so I don't have to hold them. So, but I noticed I can see my picture and it was kind of in front of me, so I'm still trying to get all the details worked out with the new camera, so please be patient with me. And I still don't have a clue how to edit videos, especially the 4K videos. I'm struggling a little bit. So anyway, my equipment, I use this from the USB input from my HP desktop computer. I'm running Windows 10. I was using Windows Media Player, and I was listening to CDs that were ripped in WAV lossless format. And then the coax input, I was using a SMSL PL200 CD player that I'm currently reviewing, and I was using the digital output of that, using it as a transport only into the DAC of this unit. And then as far as headphones, so far I've tried 3 different Hifiman headphones, the Aria Organic, the HE1000 SE, and the Susvara. And I'd wanted to try a sensitive headphone to make sure that that I had enough volume control, and I used the Grotto SR80E, and then also I've used the JM Audio XTC2 open back and the ZMF Atrium with this. Okay, getting into the sound. First, I would start out by saying that the tone balance is just slightly on the warm side of neutral. And this is an R2R DAC in this, and from my experience, pretty much every R2R DAC I've heard is slightly on the warm side of neutral, some more than others, and this one is no exception. It is slightly on the warm side of neutral, and I do really like R2R DACs. I feel they have a little bit more of a natural, more organic sound than most Delta Sigma DACs, but there are exceptions with both. But anyway, slightly on the warm side of neutral, excellent detail and resolution coming from this unit, both the DAC and the amp. A large sound stage, both in width and depth. Very punchy and dynamic. This unit has a lot of power behind it. Once again, 5.12 watts per channel into 32 ohms. So there's no shortage on power here. It's going to give your headphones all the current they need, and very punchy. So yet it sounds smooth, and it's pretty free of any grain. If you've heard the EF400, I hear a slight amount of grain with that, and this sounds smoother, but I'll get into an extensive comparison. I usually don't really do comparisons in first impressions, but I know everyone wants to know how this compares to the EF400. So this is a little smoother, a little less grain. So Anyway, as far as power, this thing has plenty of power for any headphone you want to throw at it. I was listening to the Susvara for quite a while with this, and with most CDs, and it does depend a little bit on the output level of the CD, but most CDs, a comfortable listening level on high gain is the dial pretty much at about 12 o'clock with the Susvara. If the recording level is a little lower, I might be a little higher, up around 1 o'clock. Or if I want to listen to it louder, I might be at 1 or 2 o'clock. But this has more than enough power to drive the Susvara very well. Very solid bass, very punchy, where underpowered amps, you know right away with the Susvara if an amp just doesn't have enough power. So, because they lose bass impact and bass weight. So, I did have some time and I did compare this pretty extensively. I mean, not, days and days, but I spent several hours comparing this to the EF400. Like I said, everyone wants to know how this compares. Is this an upgrade to the EF400? And I want to start out by saying that the sound is actually very similar from this and the EF400, but there are some small differences, and that's what took a little bit of time to hear. I mean, if you've got an EF400 and you're looking to upgrade, it's not going to be a huge difference in sound. There is slight differences, but nothing huge. The biggest difference is going to be your inputs. I really liked the EF400 when I reviewed it, but the biggest issue I had with the EF400 was only one digital input, and that was USB, and no coax or no optical digital inputs. So I couldn't use it with a CD player or something like that. I could only use it with my computer. So this unit does have the coaxial digital input, which really makes me happy. I kind of wish it had the optical too, but I can get by with just the coax. At least it does have another digital option. And then another big issue I had with the EF400 was no analog inputs, which means you could only use it with its own internal DAC. You couldn't use it as a standalone amp with a different DAC, and this unit does have two analog inputs, and you can hook both of them up to different DACs or whatever, because you can toggle through either the RCA or the XLR input. So this has two analog inputs, which is a huge improvement over the EF400. So if inputs are your reason for upgrading, then this definitely is a big upgrade. And but as far as the sound, I can't really say it's an upgrade. It's more of a sideways move compared to the EF400, and I'll try to explain in just a minute the differences in the sound. And I did want to show you that this also works as a pretty nice headphone stand, and this is the Hifiman Susvara right here. And the only thing is this does get warm. It doesn't get hot. It's not going to damage your headphones, but it does make the ear pads a little warm, and in the summer, that might not be something you want, is warm ear pads on your headphone pre-warmed. So, okay, having a little trouble here, but anyway. So those are basically the advantages you're going to get with this going up from the F400 to this. Okay, then I told you that there's slight differences in the sound. And first of all, this has slightly more power. I think the F400 was 4 watts per channel, and this is 5.12. Not really a significant difference. They both have plenty of power for the Susvara or HE6. This has a slightly smoother, where the EF400 at times I hear a slight amount of grain. Nothing really bad or noticeable, but this just sounds a little bit smoother. It's a little more focused, kind of like comparing Blu-ray to 4K, but The resolution isn't really better. It just sounds a little more, like I said, the only word I can really think of right now is smoother, but not with a loss of detail. I will say though that comparing the two, that the mid-range on this is a little bit more forward than the EF400, where the EF400, the mid-range is just slightly further off in the distance, where this is a little more in your face. It's a little more emphasized. The mid-range vocals will be a little louder compared to the music with this over the EF400. With the EF400, I would say the mid-range, including vocals, just sound a little bit richer and a little bit warmer. Not a big difference, just slightly. This has a slightly drier, less rich mid-range and vocals than the EF400. So for that reason, I almost prefer the sound of the EF400. It's just a little warmer, and the EF400 seems to have slightly more weight to the music. It just feels a little heavier, where this feels a little leaner, a little bit thinner. The EF400 just, I don't know if it's a difference in the DAC and the difference in the amp, but the EF400 just has slightly more punch, and these are not big differences. These are very small differences that I had to go back and forth for several hours to really hear these differences. But I'd say the EF400 just has a little bit more weight to the music and a little bit richer, warmer mid-range, but once again, just slightly. So other than that, they do sound very similar. There's not a big difference in the sound. So if you've got the EF400, if you need the digital inputs, the analog inputs, then this is a great option. If not, I don't really feel you're getting a big upgrade in sound. It's a little tiny bit smoother, a little bit cleaner, a little more focused, but not a big noticeable difference really. So, but bottom line, this is a great sounding amp DAC at the price now at $649. I think it's a great deal. Not crazy about the way it looks. I mean, it's not bad. It just, I don't know. I like the upright design. I'm not crazy about the rectangle volume knob. I think it would have looked better with a round one. I wish it had a separate button, one button for gain up and down, and one button for your oversampling, non-oversampling. I don't like having to toggle through all four to change oversampling rates or gain rate. That's one thing I don't like. Kind of wish it had an optical input, but I can live without that. And then one more thing I did want to show you. The bottom of this is pretty much smooth. And that does, even though this has got some pretty good weight, 6 1/4 pounds, when it's sitting on the table, it depends on the surface, but some surfaces it's actually kind of slippery. So when you try to unplug or plug in your headphones, it tends to move around a little bit. So I wish it had some sort of rubber pads or something on the bottom. And I'm sure that's something anybody could do. You could get some little stick-on rubber pads and put on there. You know, I don't do that because it's a loaner unit, but, you know, I would spend the $1 or $2 and do that if this were mine, or, you know, if I was going to buy this. So anyway, very impressive sound. Has enough power for even the Susvara, and at $649, really good deal. I will be back in a month or so, and to be honest, it might be longer because I've got a lot of reviews lined up, and I want to compare this to the Hifiman Serenade, which I'm not sure if you can see it. It's right over here. A little more expensive at $999. It uses the same DAC, but it has a different amp. I think it's actually slightly less power, but anyway, I want to compare this to the Serenade. I've also got the iFi Audio Neo IDS2, which is a huge upgrade in my opinion from the original Neo, and that's putting out 5 watts per channel, so it's similar in power to this, and that will be a great shootout because they're about the same price. Or I think that's $7.99, which was the original price of this, or maybe $8.99. It's actually a little more expensive. Excuse me. See, I'm still disorganized. I don't even know where my water's at. Sorry, but it was a hot day and I was out working outside. So anyway, also I have the topping A70 and D70 stack. The two combined is quite a bit more than this, but I'll probably run a comparison with that, and who knows what else I might get in by the time I do my full review on this. So I will get back to you sometime in the near future with my full review, but in the meantime, I don't think you can go wrong with this. It's a really nice sound, but if you've already got the EF400, unless you need the other digital inputs or the analog inputs, you'll probably be happy just sticking with that. Like I said, a little bit different in sound, kind of a side up, not really an upgrade, kind of a sideways move as far as amp quality, in my opinion. So I'll get back to you soon with my full review. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up to 32.5 thousand members, I believe. Just continues to grow. You're all welcome over there. And once again, thanks for watching my video.